Hey Jody, good to see you.
How you doing, brother? Good to see you.
I love the setup. The brick wall, the blue light, Riverside. I feel like I'm on a very professional podcast right now.
I'm trying, my friend. I'm trying. This is this will be my second podcast. I've got quite the lineup coming up of people that I'm going to be interviewing that have been part of my journey, and so I'm, learning as much as I can doing this, and just excited to, my goal is to share the world that I've experienced in my recovery. This is Jody from the Resilient Addict podcast, and I'm here with my guest, John from Pure Desire. John, tell us a little bit about Pure Desire and how you got involved.
Yeah, I would be honored to. For those of you who don't know what Pure Desire Ministries is, Dr. Ted and Diane Roberts, who were local pastors in the Gresham, Oregon area in 1993, had just begun to work with men and women primarily. And as they were doing, whether that was couples counseling or just men's and women's studies, just perpetually found again and again and again that so many of these men, primarily at the time, were struggling deeply with some level of sex addiction, whether that was buying sex, using pornography, or continued masturbation use, and just seeing it really impact marriages. And Dr. Ted saw that the answers that the church had been giving of try harder, stop it, memorize more, just love Jesus more, weren't leading to transformation. We don't believe those are bad answers. We just don't know if they're full or whole answers. And so Dr. Ted, who was a pastor at the time, set out to really learn from the leading sex addiction expert in the country, Dr. Patrick Carnes, who is still running and overseeing ITAP, which is the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals, which was a little bit uncouth for a pastor to go sit underneath the leading sex addiction expert in the country. But Ted began to learn so much about the brain, and that at the core, there is a root of addiction, whether that's the cloak of shame or breaking through the wall of denial or a binge purge pattern or really woundedness, deep woundedness. And that these trivial answers weren't addressing these inner, deeper longings that were going unmet or simply unnoticed. And men were staying unaware, unfortunately. And so Ted, being so convinced that this was not just a moral problem, but a brain problem, asked Dr. Patrick Carnes, hey, can I take some of your content that I think is just simply giving light to the truth that is already in the Bible about not being conformed to the patterns of this world, but being renewed by the transformation of our minds? Like, this is neuroplasticity. Our brains can get stuck, and they can be retrained and get unstuck. And so Dr. Ted said, hey, Patrick Carnes, can I take, yes, your clinical studies, but can I infuse it with biblical truth? And I think, Jody, that is one of the most core tenets to who we are at Pure Desire. Yes, we are biblically based, and we are clinically informed when it comes to compulsive sexual behavior and betrayal trauma. And both, unfortunately, are so rampant in the church right now. But again, that cloak of denial that Dr. Ted talked about in the noose of addiction is also just as thick and just as heavy, because it's really hard to look at the painful things in our life and to make sense of them. I love this quote from Brene Brown. She simply says, when we deny our stories, they define us. But when we own our stories, we can write a brave new ending. Jody,
Hmm.
that's why you and I are both here on this podcast.
That's right, brother. That's
We were
right.
in denial. We were
Yeah.
defined by our stories at some point, and somehow that cloak of denial or that felt experience of shame was lifted and the light cracked in, and we began to believe or see that, you know what, life might be better on the other side of addiction. But you know what stood between you and I? It's just fear, right? Like, so much fear, addressing the pain, going back to go forwards. And I would just say, as we begin, I believe that everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. The question is, will somebody come alongside with enough compassion and curiosity that gives you the courage to face it? Courage is not the mark of our strength or bravado. I think courage is more accurately defined by our willingness to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable is the hardest journey. Like, I love, as I get to talk with men, Jody, it's like, oh, you think being, brave and strong and masculine is, this this highest goal. I'm like, no, no, I actually think being really vulnerable and really weak, that's where Christ says his power will rest on us.
I want to back up for just a moment. You mentioned Patrick Carnes. He kind of started from a alcohol addiction place, and I noticed in my journey with Pure Desire and utilizing your tools, you guys have really adapted a lot of different methodologies from the betrayal model that AppSats uses, stuff that Patrick Carnes doesn't really go into that. I know Patrick kind of has a co-addiction model. So I'd love to hear how you guys have incorporated, how times have changed and how you've adapted to that.
Yeah, I'll give you maybe more of just the story internally, maybe less about the clinical side of all of that.
Yeah.
Just to say, I am not in any ways a betrayal trauma expert. Let's just start there. But yeah, the amount of emails and the amount of calls and the amount of contacts that we were getting as an organization, as research was changing, as we were finding out more about what is trauma, how does it impact the mind, the body, the brain, how does it impact the spouse, what's helpful for the spouse, what's not helpful. The original Betrayal and Beyond workbook that we had for the betrayed spouse, often and more typically the woman, was much more from the lens of, hey, we've all been wounded and we need to assess
Mhm.
wounds in order to go forwards. And the new book that has more of that AppSats approach regarding betrayal trauma is, hey, before we invite a betrayed spouse to go backwards in their own story, we have to come to a place of safety. How do we create safety and a level of stability and foundation? Because her whole world, again, I'm using gender stereotypes more often. A woman is betrayed, but men are betrayed as well. A betrayed spouse's world has been completely shattered, completely broken. What is reality? What's reality in this moment? What's reality the last 20 years? Wait, what was happening on that vacation? Like, where were you? What can I trust? Who are you? I don't know who you are anymore. I thought I knew who you were. Like, the entire fabric of the reality just got altered. And inviting somebody in that place to be like, oh, by the way, you have childhood wounds you need to address wasn't as helpful. Now, again, I do believe that we all are worth going back and assessing where we've been, where we are, and where we could be. Again, that's a worthwhile journey. But for the betrayed, from a more informed approach regarding betrayal trauma, safety, stability, and foundation is critical to getting to
Mm.
a place, especially if they're still living with the addict. Like, how do you navigate the world that is still on fire? You just found out it's on fire for the first time. And now, how do you come to a place of safety that you can approach your own journey of healing individually long before you think about reinstituting what togetherness looks like in the marriage? How do you come to safety? How does he pursue a path? And Jody, I think what I'm so grateful for you and your guys' story is there are a lot of betrayed spouses who pursue healing. Praise God. And there are sometimes addict spouses who stay stuck and never pursue healing. And so again, it's like for some of these betrayed spouses, they're going on a solo journey and their spouse isn't choosing to go with them. It's just like this journey is worth it for you. Yes, our heart is to restore marriages, of course, but also our heart is that individuals, men and women, betrayed or addict, would have safety and stability and emotional support they need. And I think that was really the big push of the new curriculum, simply saying, how do we build those things before we invite a woman or a betrayed man to go backwards into his story?
Well, a lot of times these couples are on an island. As a man going through this, I didn't have support. I didn't know what support looked like. I didn't know who to look to. But for my wife, family never understands. You have family that's on one side of the fence. They're like, oh, you should leave him. That's what everybody's, once a cheater, always a cheater. And then you have people that are supported, but they're also trying, they've got an agenda. They want you to stay together because they don't want a broken family. They want holidays to be normal. So you have all this external influence from, that the betrayed is experiencing, and they don't feel safe. So their fight or flight is kicking in. They want to run. It's a very volatile time. And so I think that's why I find Pure Desire to be such a huge benefit for couples, because you guys offer some amazing tools for both the betrayed and the betrayer. And I think we'll get to that. But I'm curious, for you, was there a defining moment when you realized that sexual, healing from this is possible?
Man, for sure. And I would take you back to the moment where I think I first like really had my denial structure broken. Uh,
Hmm. I love how you say that. That
Yeah,
resonates with me, brother. That resonates with me.
yeah. Before I could realize that healing was possible, I had to realize I was in need of healing, because I think I had lived with a pretty healthy dose of denial, and I didn't really think I needed healing. I thought I was healed. I thought this was the most healed I'd ever be. I thought a binge purge pattern of giving in and going without was just the commonality of everyday man. Like, I thought I was okay. And just to backtrack for a second, exposed to porn at 9, moment of deep shame. What is this? Sexuality's bad. I'm bad. If this ever happens, nobody can know. Hide, which I think is so representative of the garden narrative. Sin enters. What do? They're afraid first, and then they hide. Fear, hide, and then God comes after them. Wow, like the gospel narrative right here in the garden, like God is already coming after us. God, for anybody who's listening, God is after your restoration more
That's
than you
right.
are, and
Amen.
he has been after it for longer than you've been. And I
That's
think
right.
that's what's so indicative of my story. 13 was given an iPod Touch, which just unleashed access to affordable, free, it's literally free pornography, aggressive, and this anonymous behavior. I love those 4 words regarding kind of the common day place of pornography: accessible, affordable, anonymous, and aggressive. Those are helpful words in helpful context. I wish it wasn't true, right? Because like that just creates quite a storm of addiction, right? Those 4 A's lead to another A word called addiction. And so this for me was just so unchecked and uncontrolled behind closed doors. I was the perfect Christian kid, playing the bass in the worship team, serving in youth group, oldest of 4 brothers, that role model, not drinking, not having premarital sex, and yet caving so deeply behind closed doors because my internal world was really chaotic. I didn't feel a sense of belonging in high school. I felt rejected. I was choked out in a locker room, like elements of physical abuse. Because I wasn't having sex, I was labeled as potentially gay or simply perverted because I was upholding a sexual ethic, but all the while caving behind closed doors. Why? Because porn never rejected me. Porn always accepted me and soothed me. Like Jody, you and I, and anybody listening, we were built for what? Comfort, connection,
That's
and
right.
soothing. And those are really good God giving longings and needs. And unfortunately, porn provides this pseudo solution as if it's meeting those things, and it never fulfills its promise. So that was most of my high school experience. At 18, had a experience at a camp where somebody went first and shared their story, and I'm like, what? Like, I'm not the only Christian struggling with porn. This is crazy. I shared my story, and 5 out of the 6 guys in the room, who were all 18, had all grown up in Christian homes, had the exact same story, and my heart broke because I realized that I thought wrongly I had been living alone, but really I was just dying in silence because nobody was saying anything, Jody, which is why I'm so grateful for this podcast. Because what? We're getting to have the conversation that is so often not being had. And in the lack of this conversation, there is so much abuse simply by, like, I think not having a conversation is a form of abuse. Like, we deserve healthy sexual education, but it's not happening. And so we're going to destructive behaviors. All that to say, how did denial get kicked? In college, I was in purity groups, leading purity groups for 3 years, but living in a binge purge cycle. What is that? Giving into a behavior and going without it for a certain length of time. Giving in, going without. And I'm like, you know what, Jody? My addiction in high school felt daily. I was using masturbation almost nightly as a soothing behavior and using pornography whenever I could get it. So in college, I'm like, I'm open, I'm honest, I'm confessing, I'm leading these groups. Like, this is who I've now become, and I feel really like set in that, and I'm really appreciative of what God had provided. And yet I was still missing something. I was missing the tools to unpack my story, to assess the wounds, to break through denial. And so when I got hired to become a missionary with Crew, they said, hey, we can't put you alone on the road in stress. That'll only lead you back to addiction. I'm like, addiction? They're like, we will only hire you if you go through a Pure Desire 7-pillar counseling group. And Jody, my whole paradigm got kicked. I'm like, counseling? That's for broken people. I don't need that. The world's broken. I'm trying to change the world. And they're like, yeah, but John, what if God is trying to change you? I'm like, no, no,
Mm.
no. I'm like, the world needs changing. They said, no, 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 John, God fully anticipated your brokenness, and we believe that He's longing to heal you. And so it was really this kind of crisis moment of like, I don't get this job and I don't get to pursue what feels like calling over my life unless I go through this. Again, everything you want is on the other side of fear. And their language of addiction and needing counseling was such powerful tools to break down some of that, again, that cloak of denial I had been living in. They're just like pulling it off of me. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not as well as I think I am. And then as I got into that group, that was 25 years ago, Jody, oh my gosh. The second lesson is sharing your top 4 sexual secrets. Are you kidding me? Like, I thought I was taking these to my grave. There was no way I was telling anybody about some of the fantasies I had or ways in which I had masturbated. Like, no way. And then week 2, I told 4 other men things that I thought I would never tell anybody in my whole life. And I began to see that I had grown as sick as my secrets, but that I could be as healthy as I was honest. That became the journey of the next 10 months, which led to another year, which led to the last 5 years of just believing that I can be as healthy as I was honest, and that I was so sick in my secrets and lies. I think secrets really just, again, the way we protect, the way we perform, the way in which we lie. And it felt safe, but it was killing me.
I just want to hold space for that little boy. That, I mean, that's a lot of pain to carry, brother. And that secret is, it resonates with me so deeply. I was molested or raped, however you want to look at it, when I was 3. And I carried that until I was in the 10th grade. And that's, as I can feel that for you, and I also resonate that for myself. And so, thank you for sharing that. It's a beautiful realization when you get to that place in life where you can break free from that. It's
Yes.
huge.
To be held, to be seen, to be
Yeah.
witnessed well. And so thank you for witnessing me well. And just similar to you, Jody, to say, so sorry. And I know we had chatted earlier, just the Dan Allender quote, right? That the enemy must love sexual abuse because what takes seconds to occur could take a lifetime to unpack. And Jody, if I could just offer like a word to those listening, any addict at some point was betrayed. I know that's a weird concept. I'm not trying to make light of betrayal trauma. That's another thing. I'm talking about being betrayed as in their trust was broken. At some point they learned the world was unsafe. And so they what? They hid. And for you or for I or for so many, coming out of hiding feels like death. And so we don't do it. We stay hidden. We stay stuck, believing the lie of shame that says, if they knew me, they would not love me. And yet, you and I both know that is our greatest need, to be known, yes, and loved. My coworker Rodney often says, he used to sing, Jesus loves me, this I know. He now sings, Jesus knows me, this
It's
I.
beautiful. Yeah. I think as men, we all want to feel loved, respected, wanted. And those feelings just perpetuate this addiction, because in a perfect world, we love ourselves, we're secure in ourselves, but we also know that God loves us and that we rely on God to provide that for us ultimately. Tell me, what's a common myth? And I think you kind of already spoke to this, but what's a common myth that, a lot of sex addicts, or even people who think of sex addicts, you often find correcting? It's a common thing.
Yeah, two things. I think the two greatest lies, which again at this point, even in this episode, are probably apparent, but just to restate them, is that they believe they're alone, or they believe that their sexual behavior is worse than another. And just to highlight this for a second, we were recently in Wisconsin at an event, and I had taken an exercise that I had heard used in a different area and kind of repurposed it. And it was titled Stand Up for Your Brother. It was a 20-question survey about being exposed to porn, struggling with porn, trying to stop a sexual behavior, being preoccupied with thoughts, um, questions about physical abuse, question about sexual abuse. And you just simply answered yes or no. You circled it. We all had the same color pen. That's important. You don't put your name. This is anonymous. You hand it in. You then reshuffle them and you hand them back out. You read this list through this list. And if your page, which is now somebody else's page in the room, has it circled yes, you stand up. Jody, oh my goodness. It's one thing to hear that 75% of men are struggling in the church, to hear that stat. It's one thing to hear it. It's another thing to stand up for your brother in the room who circled yes, identifying that that stat is true, and to realize that everyone is standing in the room. Like, you want to talk about kicking shame or kicking the lie that shame perpetuates that you're alone? Oh, it was utterly shattered in the room. I think one of my favorite parts about that exercise was that there was multiple people who stood up for, I have been sexually abused. Why was that important? Because I think there's levels of which we're like, well, of course everybody struggles with porn. Okay, well, everybody's seen it. Well, and everybody's experimented with masturbation, but there's deeper lies that we hold in denial that says, but nobody's been abused like I've been abused. And for, I don't know which men in the room circled that, right? Because other people were standing on their behalf, advocating, witnessing them, validating them. I will stand for you. Even when nobody else knows, I will stand for you. And to watch multiple men stand in the room, it was just breathtaking, man. It was moving. Like, this might be the first time somebody in this room who's been sexually abused has been advocated for in their entire life. And,
Mm,
and they're watching other men stand on their behalf. So, again, number one, you're alone. It's just not true. And then number two, that marriage will solve it. And I love that Rodney says all the time, again, Rodney Wright, one of our coworkers here at Pure Desire, that will not, marriage will simply reveal what it finds. So if it finds you healthy, it will reveal your health. And
mm.
if it finds you unhealthy, it will reveal your unhealth. Marriage will not solve you. It will simply reveal more of what it finds. And I think for so many addicts, they walk in thinking, I have a sex problem and I have a sex need. And if that need gets met, then I won't have a problem. But the reality is, Jody, you and I both know that sex addiction is not about sex. Sex addiction is about medicating the wounds that we
That's
don't
right.
process. And so
Oh,
those wounds are going to be unprocessed at the end of you using masturbation to cope or now experiencing sexuality with a spouse in marriage. The wounds are still there, unfortunately. So if we don't do the deep work of revealing what's happened to us in the past in order to move forward, we will take our unhealth into a marriage. And unfortunately, for so many men, they get even further trapped in isolation and deception and secrecy, believing if my spouse knew, they would not love me.
that's beautiful, brother.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. Tell me, how does Pure Desire go beyond betrayal manage or behavior management, excuse me, to address root issues? You know, I know for a lot of guys out there, um, they try to modify behavior. They try to fix the behavior. Sometimes they use blockers. Sometimes they'll try accountability groups, but really that's kind of like putting a band-aid on a problem. As you know, how do you guys go deeper than that?
So good. I want to start with story just because I think story has a beautiful way of sneaking past our watchful dragons and just like gripping our soul. And so for me, I would not have known before a Pure Desire group that that moment of exposure was one of the most painful moments in my life because of the lies that were associated. Rodney Wright again would often say, lies are just cognitive distortions. These are thinking errors that we hold, and we act upon what we believe. So, just as an overview before I share the story, we have our hands, which are our behaviors. We have our head, which can constitute our thoughts or our feelings, and our heart, which is where our core beliefs lie. We act upon what we believe. So, if you want to stop or outgrow or mature from an unhelpful behavior at your hand level, you must begin to do the inner work of assessing what am I thinking and feeling and what core beliefs, memories, or moments in the past are driving those. Where did I get stuck? So, Pillar 3, Lesson 1 in the 7 Pillars workbook is your top 10 pain moments. And I think painful moments or traumatic moments, which is not just what happened to you. Gabor Mate would say trauma is what happens inside of you. It's our inability to process what happened. It's in painful moments that I think lies from the enemy of your soul get so planted. Dr. Doug Weiss at some point said that we're just really fancy dirt, which I'm like, I think we're more than that. I think God sees us as more than that. But again, if you think of us being clay, And these seeds of brokenness or these lies get implanted, like literally embedded in our soul, and unfortunately will then bear fruit, right? It's from the inside out that defiles a person. And so I think it's in identifying these painful moments that we begin to undo or rewrite the story. So let me highlight that. At 9, I was doing a homework assignment with my mom when an image of a topless woman appeared. She quickly scrolled away. I'm like, wait, what was that? She said, nothing you need to see. I'm like, okay. Curiosity and doubt being buried in that moment. I went back 30 minutes later and I found the image. And as I did, my mom walked up the stairs behind me to find me. And if I'm being honoring, she was not prepared or qualified to respond. What parent is? And if I'm being honest, she responded in anger and rage that left me thinking three things. Sex is bad. When I'm sexual, I'm bad. So if I'm ever sexual again, nobody can ever know. I now look back at that 9-year-old with such compassion, saying that 9-year-old was looking for sexual education. And now, when I'm tempted as a 27-year-old male to pursue lust or fantasy or pornography or masturbation, I can simply look at myself, hold myself with compassion that does not perpetuate suffering but actually alleviate suffering by saying, hey, I know that you're feeling like that 9-year-old boy who wants maybe a level of sexual education. John, remember, you're 27 and you know what sexuality is, and you know what healthy management and stewardship of your sexuality is. There is a need here. But more often, I would say sexuality is more of a want. We're not going to die without it. Yes, there's a good desire here. Let's steward it well. We don't have to act like we were when we were 9. We know what sexuality is. We've been held well. But again, if I hadn't addressed that moment, if I hadn't understood maybe some of the lies I had believed, I would still believe I'm bad, my sexuality is bad, and nobody can know. Now I believe honesty is the pathway to health. My sexuality is good, and I was created in the image of God. Very good, right? And I'm now seeing myself rightly, I'm seeing God rightly, and I'm seeing others rightly, and I'm moving back into right relationship or connection, because connection is the opposite of addiction. Whereas in the past, I would have dove off the path into addiction, into isolation to medicate and cope. I now know there's a wound there, and I now know what I needed to know that sexuality is a good thing. Yes, given in the context of marriage, that I'm very good, made in His image, and God is
That's
not
beautiful.
nothing from me. He wants to
Yeah.
educate and show me a better way.
That's beautiful. That's a for me when I was stuck in knowing that the difference between my true eros, my true sexual desire, and feeling like that was this powerful need that must be met. And when I really started to unpack that and realize like, yeah, when I was 3, I didn't think I needed a blowjob.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a little boy, boobs didn't matter to me in the way that society has taught us. You go to tribes in Africa. I mean, most of the people there are naked. You don't see people off having sex in the corner every second. It's something that society has taught us that we need. Through movies and through all types of. It's everywhere now, and it's hard to escape. So I think you nailed it. Like I never knew that my intimate life with my wife could be as powerful it is because we are in such a connected space. There's no objectification. It's about intention. It's not an act that has to be done. It's this sharing of compassion and love and into you I see. It's such a powerful thing. I never knew it could be like that, my friend.
Come on, come
Yeah,
on. Well, it's just so beautiful. As you're saying that, Jody, I just think of the word presence. Like you are no longer absent, even in mind or thought.
that's right. The fantasies are gone.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
are
praise
present.
God.
You are with her.
Yeah.
Period. It's beautiful.
Yeah, amen. Curious, and this was something I got stuck in when I was discovered. What do you say to the guy who has this feeling of if I tell her everything, she'll leave me?
I would say, please do not engage a staggered disclosure. If I've learned anything from working with donors, that's my role here at Pure Desire. If I had $1 for every time I heard somebody say, yeah, we did it all wrong, we had a staggered disclosure, I'd be really rich and I could just donate all the money back to PD and stop raising money. But the reality is, to your point, so many of us, we haven't been given an education in recovery or betrayal trauma or addiction. We don't know what we're doing, right? These moments hit us like a freight train and we're simply responding. Like we just got totally sideswiped. We have no idea what's happening. And unfortunately, we then begin to leak information. Oh, well, it was actually in 2016 that's when the emotional affair began. And 2018, that's when I engaged that affair partner. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, actually in 2015, there was another, and just her whole world is being continually unraveled and reshaped and unraveled and reshaped. And now we're causing more trauma or more damage. I think the kindest thing we can do is do a level of work, potentially and hopefully with a professional counselor, of unpacking the details of our story, coming to see what's helpful to share, to what level, inviting her into that conversation. What level of detail do you want to know? What's helpful? What's not helpful? There are spouses who say, I need to know everything in order to rebuild trust. Well, then I'd work really diligently with a counselor to give her what she needs. There are other spouses who say, as long as you're doing the work, as long as you're in group, like, and I know that you're being honest and confessing and processing and unpacking, I don't need to know all the details, but I do need to know if you've relapsed, or I need to know where you're at in your recovery journey or where you're at in your sobriety timeline. Every spouse is different. Every couple is unique. But to that man who is afraid, saying she will leave me, I would just say, you're not trying to get back to the marriage that you thought you had. You're trying to get a marriage that you didn't think possible. And something is going to have to die in order for something to be resurrected. That's the call of following Jesus.
That's
Follow
beautiful.
me, take up your cross, die with me in order that you might be brought to resurrection life. And here's the reality. Adultery is biblical grounds for divorce. And that breaks my heart to say out loud on this podcast, because the reality is there are many betrayed spouses, male or female, that have biblical grounds to walk away and say, my trust has been broken. You no longer have that. Like, trusted people in my life and God have that trust, and I'm going to choose to walk away. And the reality is the consequence, right? Just the sequence of events post some of the decisions you've made could lead to the end of your marriage. That's reality. And we need to hold that intention. And we have seen God restore and redeem and rebuild countless marriages. Jody, your story is an example of that. But
Yeah.
it isn't always a happy ending. And I think we also need to sit with that tension. We live in a fallen, broken world, and not everything gets redeemed on this side, not to the degree in which we think or in which we'd want. And that sucks, if I'm being really honest, Jody. It's so hard to receive an email from clients 6 years ago that say, we had found traction, there was a relapse, we're now moving towards separation. Like, that breaks my heart. Like, absolutely. But in this world, Jesus promises you will have trouble. But I would say, take heart, because he has overcome the world. It doesn't end there. Like, for the man who's afraid, take heart. I think everything you want is on the other side of fear, and it will involve consequences and pain. That is the process forward.
Amen
And
to
it's
that.
gonna be better.
You know, something that came up for me when you were talking is I find that a lot of men, you mentioned denial earlier, but I find that a lot of men hide behind this veil of some type of shared responsibility in his acting out. Do you find that in Pure Desire's teachings, that taking accountability for the things you've done, taking ownership and saying, I did this. Nothing you did caused me to do this. I chose to act out. I chose to do these things, conscious or unconscious. That's a whole nother topic. But taking that responsibility and owning it instead of gaslighting, blaming, blame shifting, spinning around, when when the wife shares her feelings with the guy, like, this really hurt me. Well, what you did hurt me too. And so that's why I did this. I find that if you have a man or a woman, whoever the betrayer is, that can't step up and say, this is on me, then healing cannot begin at all. Like, I don't care how many groups you're in. I don't care what podcasts you watch. I don't care what books you read. I don't care what therapies you've been to. You got 5 CSATs. You're willing to do disclosure, whatever it is. until you can step up and look at the person you've hurt the most, who you've ruined their world. You've taken what they thought was this basket of love and joy and bundled in marriage and safety, and you've dropped a bomb on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then to sit there and blame that person, do you find that until a man can get to that place of being so broken that they realize this is on me, I caused this?
Yeah, I think oftentimes as the addict is getting honest for the first time, they feel freer than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
They just took the bricks in the dump truck that they were carrying and unburdened it and unloaded it onto the wife, and she's now crushed. And I do think that there is a moment of honesty and real assessment when it comes to the pain they've caused. Uh, and I would say humility, responsibility, whatever other words you'd want to put there, like has to be taken. Like responsibility has to be owned, specifically because so many, again, betrayed spouses have been gaslit, manipulated, lied to. In order for trust to be rebuilt, I think the denial structures, the lies, the pretense, the hiddenness, the passive aggressiveness, the shifting, the blame, like at some point, all of this has to come down. Those are just walls. It's just protection, right? There's some internally, there's wounds that we are protecting and not quite sure how to go after. And I would say until those walls come down, I'm not quite for sure how the marriage could be rebuilt or relationship can be restored. Because the distance, I love this. This idea of wearing a mask or pretending, just imagine you putting your arm out in front of you and kind of creating this bubble. Well, they're not really loving you, right? They're just loving this image or this perception of you. And the distance from your arm to your actual body is killing you. And until that distance is destroyed, those defense mechanisms, those levels of protection and safety, like, again, things have to get relatively unsafe. Like, things are going to have to unravel before they get better. And I think some of that shame, shifting, blaming, still just levels of protection. And self-protection is how the addict learned to survive. And just to, like, for anybody who's listening, to sit and simply say, I'm so sorry that nobody was there to protect you, and you are worth protecting, but you're going to have to get honest to assess and name the wounds and stop blaming others and take responsibility and then move forward. Like, there is hope on the other side, but the seed has to be buried. There has to be a level of death that occurs in order for new life to break forth. And sometimes I think we sit on that top of the soil, like, I don't want to be buried too much. Like, this is enough. It's like,
Yeah, that's
no,
beautiful.
God didn't ask for some of your heart to be circumcised. He asked for a total circumcision of the heart. Yeah.
What would you say to the betrayed spouse and the betrayer who's not willing to do a full therapeutical disclosure?
To some degree, you are limiting the level of healing or the depth of transformation you could experience. I understand, again, that's a very broad statement. I would be so quick to listen, to sit, to hear. So many stories are unique. I understand that. And yet we just believe. I mean, I remember hearing Dr. Ted present for the first time, and he was talking about polygraphs and having the addict spouse take a polygraph and pass a polygraph before even doing the disclosure, that the betrayed spouse would know fully what this is or that this can be trusted. And so maybe you're like, wait, a polygraph? And a lot of people are like, you actually do that? And it's like, yes, why? Because we get so good at lying and so good at hiding and so good at deceiving that we've deceived ourselves. And Dr. Ted says, man, if we don't go to the bottom and clear everything out, like, we can't make room, right? Like, we have to remove the old wineskins in order to get the new wineskins. It can't be half and half or partial. And so I just think that full disclosure, specifically therapeutic, because I think that's safe for the betrayed and helpful for the addict, is such a critical pathway forward, because lying and deception have been such a critical part of the noose of addiction and impact of betrayal, that in order to get well, there has to be a depth of honesty that leads to a greater depth of healing.
That's beautiful. I went through that process. I did 2 polygraphs, one before disclosure and one after disclosure. And next week, my polygrapher, who is world renowned, he does all the polygraphs for Dr. Jake Porter. He does polygraphs for a lot of therapists, CSATs. He's amazing. Such a man with a big heart to help men as well, but in a way that is like helping them get free by getting honest. And I'm excited to have his name's Stephen Kabler. Yeah, I'm excited to have him. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into polygraph. But one thing that I want to say to that is, how can a spouse who's been betrayed know what they're forgiving and healing from if they don't have the whole story?
Yeah, well said.
And it's one of these things. It's like she may, or the betrayed may say, well, I really don't need to know all those details. But here's the thing. You'll go through the rest of your marriage and the rest of your life wondering, is that checker somebody that he was with? She really flirted with him. What don't I know? Did he meet up with somebody here? Did he, and the mind just doesn't stop spiraling for the betrayed, because they just don't have all the information. So I find it it's almost like hitting the reset button. This is a new marriage. I am willing to stay as the betrayed and rebuild a new marriage. You're doing your work, but we have to level the playing field here so we're on the same page. And I just find so much value in that. And when I tell people that are just not in the know, they look at me like, what? A polygraph?
Sure.
And people think it's just absolutely insane. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. That's good.
It is insane. And so is addiction, right? Like thinking that we get better by doing the same thing over and over again. This is insanity. And so I think there's a level in which it's like you fight fire with fire. Like this is raging, and we're going to need some heavy duty tools to put out this fire.
Let's talk a little bit about 7 pillars. I've not been through the 7 pillars class. I'd love to hear more about it. But before we jump into that, one of the big things for me when I broke free from this was developing a self-care routine for myself. I was somebody who lived in a scarcity mindset. So that meant time was scarce, money was scarce, sex was scarce. And because those were scarce things, I coveted them. They almost became more important to me than God. It was ideal. I idolized those things. And so for me, creating a safe space to be vulnerable, to be able to share my feelings, but also a self-care routine where I was actually taking care of me. And that meant, like meditation, praying, reading, going for walks and exercise, things that I didn't take time for. And so that stress that hit me in life of being a business owner and a father and a husband and a son, all of the stresses that come along with those things would just pile on, and I would not feel them. I would just bury my emotions, hide my emotions. Was not the authentic, that mask you talked about was always out front. If somebody said, hey, how you doing? I'm like, oh man, I'm great. No, I'm really crappy. I'm really, honestly, if I'm living in integrity myself, which I know now, I didn't then, I wasn't good. And so how do you find that self-care for men, them taking the time to prioritize that is important or not?
So good. Well, in the pillars, we have a tool called the 3 circles, and you can find that on puredesire.org. Download that as a resource. And the outmost circle is all about health. Where do we want to live in health? The next inner circle is all about guardrails. Like what are we going to put from health before we crash? The middle is crash. Places we don't want to go back to, whether that's an emotional affair and a physical affair, masturbation use, pornography use, infidelity, whatever that might be. But I think it's maybe more helpful to think about it as a highway with rumble strips and then a ditch. For so many of us, we're so preoccupied with just simply trying to get away from the ditch. Like, I don't want to do this behavior. I don't want to do this behavior. The whole time we're looking at this behavior, trying to get back on the highway. And what I hear you saying, Jody, is I just began to define what the highway was. Like having an emotional check-in with my wife, being emotionally aware with myself personally, being sure to prioritize time with my kids, like being sure that I got a 30-minute run in today, being sure that I had a really incredible time playing golf with friends, doing things I enjoy. What are healthy forms of dopamine? I think often the addict believes that dopamine is only found in addiction. That's a lie. That's not true. There are healthy forms of dopamine through right relationship with God, ourselves, and others. Play, sport, making a good meal, slowing down. Like, there are so many ways in which we get to pursue health. And so instead of just defining what I'm trying to get away from, how do we define what is health for me and how do I live here? Then beginning to define what's the rumble strips, right? You're driving down the road, you hit the rumble strips while your wife's sleeping, and she's like, wait, what? What's going on? I knew I shouldn't have let you drive, whatever. And it's just like, no, no, no. What are those rumble strips? Oh, to your point, Jody, like, I'm stressed for time right now. I'm running out of time. I don't feel like I have enough time in a day. Oh, I skipped a meal. Oh, this is a little bit of a rumble strip. Why am I skipping a meal? Oh, I'm speeding up and I'm making excuses to have to do everything. Okay, rumble strip. Oh, I just yelled at somebody in traffic and I'm in my car and they can't even hear me and I'm experiencing a level of rage or anger. Oh, rumble strip. Why am I where I am and how do I get back to health? And so I think a level of emotional awareness is so critical. We use something called the FASTER scale that's also downloadable on puredesire.org to build emotional awareness. And I think we get to define certain behaviors. Again, what's the highway? What is health? What are those rumble strip behaviors where you're now moving back towards crash type behaviors that we would define as relapse or places that we don't want to return to? So that can be a really helpful tool. I think personal health, again, what are you pursuing rather than just what are you getting away from? It's both and. Freedom is from a behavior and it is for certain things. And we have to have vision of both.
Yeah, and to speak to dopamine, neuroplasticity is a thing. If you don't know it, study it, learn it, because there has to be a dopamine reset. Porn has been proven. It's like having a new partner every time. And that high alone is so powerful. You almost have to, for me, like I got rid of all social media. I got rid of my, I have Facebook, but I don't go there. I got rid of Instagram. I got rid of all of these things that were in my life that just kind of perpetuated that feed. And now I kind of live this life where like, I didn't even know there was a war going on. I just stay away from the news. And I just, to me, my priority list is God and my family and my wife. Those are, what come in for me. So kind of resetting that dopamine, I think is so, so important. I'm curious, why do you, well, let me just jump to something. I know Pure Desire does a really good job at tracking numbers. What's the current numbers looking like? I know that women using porn is on a huge rise. I know men in the church, pastors in the church, it's a huge problem, but it doesn't get talked about. And I know you guys are really involved in the whole church scene, and from a Christian standpoint, your organization is. But you're tracking this information. What are you seeing kind of on the ground? And, how do you guys speak to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to name them really clearly, 75% of men attending church this Sunday are struggling with pornography at least occasionally. And 40% of women attending church this Sunday are struggling with pornography at least occasionally. You take those two percentages and you combine them for your average Christian attending church this Sunday, and you have 54%. Like, let that sink in for a second. That means if you attend a church this Sunday and you sit down and it's not you, it is the person next to you. That's how tangible.
Wow. Yeah.
And if that is the reality, you would think the church would do something about it. But again, most pastors, over 60% of pastors, have their own personal story, but it's not safe. Because if they go first, they lose a job, a wife, a family, a house, a mortgage, a career. They lose everything. Most typically, that's not every church, right? There are good churches who have restoration plans for pastors. We have pastors only groups for men and leaders in the Christian faith to find help, even outside of their church. But the reality is, if the pastor can't go first, then neither can the church. And so 18% of pastors have a current struggle. That's almost 1 in 5. 1 in 5 pastors.
It's interesting you bring that up. I lead a men's integrity group at my church, and part of that is I brought in the Pure Desire curriculum. So blessed to have it because it's been such an amazing tool for these men. But I went to my pastor, and he shared with me his personal struggle, He actually started coming to the meetings. Such an amazing story. But I still find that this hesitancy to want to share that with the greater body of the church. The fact that this group exists, the fact that what we're doing, I can't get them to make an announcement on it in church. So it's not only a problem, but there's that I think we get back to that shame, that fear that you talked about. I wonder if you could just speak to it from a God standpoint. God wants us to turn to Him. God, He's calling us, and we still want to do it our way.
Yeah.
And I struggle to understand that from a church standpoint. And I know that really isn't the topic of this conversation, but it just fell on my heart. Like, it's something I'm struggling with, because I see the work God can do through Pure Desire, through men who want to lead and take this challenge on. But there's like this roadblock that Satan keeps putting in people, like, no, we can't let this out of the bag. Mm.
Yeah, two thoughts come to mind immediately. I just see the image of the Father on the porch in Luke 15, and just like, and God saying, like, this is my heart for the addict. I'm waiting for him. I'm not angry. God is not wagging his finger at you down from heaven saying, how could you? He is extending the hand. And we see that most clearly through the person of Christ, right? He came to be with us, to put on flesh, to understand what it was like to endure temptation, to die on our behalf. Like, this is the good news, that he is not ashamed of us, that he is madly in love with us, seeing our worth and value so much so that he would give up himself, his son, on our behalf. And I just, again, the Father is waiting, and the son comes home and he's got this rehearsed speech. I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Like, I'm just willing to be a servant if you would take me back. And what does he do? He runs through the town that he might not have to endure the shame ceremony that was going to come. So the father takes on the shame, protects his son, a robe around his shoulders, sandals for his feet, kills the fattened calf, and what? He puts the ring on. And the ring, right, a family signet, probably a family crest, probably the exact ring that the son had thrown in the father's chest, saying, I'm no longer your son. I don't want to be a part of your family. And what does the father do? He replaces, he restores the ring, which I would say looks a whole lot like the restoration of value and identity. I think shame says, I'm bad and I'm not lovable. I'm too far gone. God could never love me. And for so many men, they are assaulted in a valley of shame perpetually, and they don't know how to get out. And I would say God is not wagging his finger above you. God is offering
Judgment.
his hand into the pit, helping you, wanting to pull you out of the muck and the mire. Why? Because of his grace and his kindness and his mercy. And it is only his kindness
Yeah.
that leads.
And God doesn't stop, brother.
For
He
sure.
doesn't stop. He doesn't judge. He doesn't stop. Man, I feel like I could talk to you forever, and I know you are hungry. So, I am so thankful for you. And I just want to make a plug real quick for those that are on the fence for God, Jesus, questioning. Know that we all have been in that place. We all have questioned so much about the stories in the Bible. I want to plug the TV series The Chosen. It's on Amazon. I think it does a really good job of, from a modern standpoint, telling the story of Jesus. And I found it to be very powerful, and it's amazing. What is the best way people can connect with Pure Desire? I know you probably have a tool on your website where people can plug into a group. If there's not a group in their area, there's a lot of content online. What would you say to somebody who wants to get plugged in and start leaning into this?
Two thoughts. If you are in a place where you're like, this is my story and I need to talk to somebody right now and figure out what's next, we have a free 15-minute consultation with a clinician or one of our counselors here at Pure Desire. So please, puredesire.org, you can find the free 15-minute consultations just simply by searching it out in the toolbar. And then number two, I'd say our podcast. We have a weekly podcast, and this seems to be the largest front door to our organization. These conversations are hard to have personally. It helps when you can put it in, on a commute or in a headphone and simply begin to listen and to catch the language and to find yourself in the storyline. We have over 400 episodes. It's just so deep. And if you're listening on this podcast, you could simply jump over to the Pure Desire podcast, hit subscribe, download monthly, and join us for this conversation. Because here's the reality, Jody. So many of us were never given this conversation. I'm not
Right.
working with men. I'm working with little boys, and you know that, and so do I. I'm trying to give them the conversation that I was never given. As I've now learned to grow and mature, and I was given the conversation. That's what we're doing. We're starting a conversation that we might catch the glimpse of hope, healing, and freedom that breaks through our denial and invites us to so much more life.
Mm. Amen to that. You know, I always tell people when I'm talking to them, other men, that I was a boy in a man's body, and I hit it really well.
Yes.
So, man, John, I am so thankful for you, brother. You have an amazing story. Pure Desire is doing amazing things. I hope we get to do this again. I would love to come on to your podcast at some point, or have you on again the show. And I'll be staying tuned. And I'm really excited to get to the point where I can bring 7 Pillars to my men's group, because I know it goes a lot deeper than Sexual Integrity 101.
Yes.
So God bless you. God bless you. God bless Pure Desire. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care.